Alright, buckle up for a story that spans oceans, royal courts, and secret negotiations, a story that changed the fate of the American Revolution forever. Imagine a grand hall in Paris, crystal chandeliers casting warm light across marble floors, where diplomats in powdered wigs and silk coats whisper in hushed tones. It's late 1777, and all eyes are on the New World. The American colonies have been fighting Britain in a struggle that seemed hopeless, until news of a shocking victory arrives. That news? The Battle of Saratoga. For the French, this wasn't just any skirmish. It was the moment they'd been waiting for, a sign that maybe, just maybe, these ragtag Americans could actually win. And suddenly, the American Revolution wasn't just a colonial rebellion, it was a chance for France to settle old scores with Britain and shake the world order to its core. France had been watching from the sidelines as America's battle with Britain unfolded. But watching doesn't mean uninvolved. The French, still nursing wounds from their own losses to Britain, were itching for a rematch. Supporting the Americans? That was like a tantalizing prospect, a way to hit Britain where it hurt. But France wasn't just going to throw its support behind any uprising. The French crown needed assurance that this revolution had staying power. In 1776, Benjamin Franklin, yes, that Benjamin Franklin, arrived in France to test the waters. With his charm, wit, and clever sense of diplomacy, he started networking with French officials, artists, philosophers, and influencers. Franklin wasn't just a diplomat, he was practically a rock star in Paris. People were captivated by his unique blend of humility and brilliance. But Franklin had a tough job. He had to convince the French that the American colonies were worth betting on. While Franklin worked his magic in Paris, the American forces back home were in the thick of it, fighting tooth and nail against the British. And then came the Battle of Saratoga. It wasn't just a victory, it was the victory. On October 17, 1777, General Horatio Gates and his troops defeated British General John Burgoyne, who surrendered his entire army. This battle showed the world that the Americans were no joke. They had strategy, resilience, and now, a critical victory under their belts. When news of Saratoga crossed the Atlantic, it hit like a thunderbolt. France had been looking for a sign, and here it was. This wasn't just a fluke or a lucky break, it was proof that the Americans had a real chance. French officials, who had been cautious and skeptical, suddenly found themselves buzzing with excitement. Now, Franklin's persuasive arguments didn't seem so far-fetched. With Saratoga as a powerful bargaining chip, Franklin and his fellow American diplomats started pressing harder for an official alliance. Behind closed doors, the French court entered a flurry of secret meetings and intense negotiations. They weren't just discussing how to help the Americans, they were discussing how to strike back at Britain. In Versailles, King Louis XVI and his ministers weighed the risks and rewards. Openly supporting the Americans meant war with Britain, a daunting prospect. But the potential rewards? Huge! If Britain lost its colonies, it would be a massive blow to its power, while France would regain its standing as a major player on the global stage. The possibility of a weakened Britain was just too tantalizing to ignore. The French foreign minister, Comte de Vergennes, was one of the strongest advocates for supporting America. He saw this alliance as a chance to shift the balance of power in Europe. He, along with other top officials, hammered out the terms that would eventually shape one of the most influential alliances in history. Finally, on February 6, 1778, France made it official. They signed two treaties with America, a treaty of amity and commerce, which recognized American independence, and a treaty of alliance, which committed France to military support. This wasn't just a small gesture, it was a full-fledged alliance, with France agreeing to provide troops, naval support, supplies, and funding. France was all in. The American colonies, who had been fighting a daunting war on a shoestring budget, suddenly had a superpower on their side. And Britain now faced the prospect of fighting a war on multiple fronts. This Franco-American alliance was the turning point of the Revolutionary War. French ships started crossing the Atlantic, loaded with soldiers, cannons, gunpowder, and supplies. The French Navy would go on to play a crucial role in later battles, including the final showdown at Yorktown. And it all stemmed from that moment when France decided to gamble on America after Saratoga. France's decision to support America was risky, no doubt about it. It plunged France into debt, contributed to rising tensions at home, and ultimately sowed the seeds for the French Revolution. But in the context of the American Revolution, the gamble paid off in spades. With French support, the American colonies didn't just survive, they thrived, eventually securing their independence in 1783. This alliance went beyond military strategy. It was the birth of a relationship that would shape international diplomacy and inspire future revolutions around the world. France and America became unlikely allies bound by a shared desire for freedom and a mutual distrust of British dominance. And it all started with the shocking news of one victory, the Battle of Saratoga. One event, one alliance, and a decision that changed the course of history. Imagine if Saratoga hadn't gone the way it did. If the Americans had lost, would France have still taken the risk? Maybe Franklin would have had to pack up his charm and go home, leaving the American Revolution a distant dream. But history took a different path, and in that moment of victory, a revolution gained momentum, an alliance was born, and a new nation was set on the path to independence.